หัวข้อในการอบรมวันนี้นะคะจะเป็นการได้ความรู้พื้นฐานเกี่ยวกับแผนการรับมือ Incident Response Plan นะคะเพื่อนำความรู้ไปประกอบใช้ในการฝึกทางไซเบอร์ค่ะที่จะกำหนดจัดขึ้นในวันที่ 12-24 ธันวาคมนี้ค่ะ
Okay, good morning and welcome all the participants who just joined the training today. Okay, we are now letting people into the workshop and the workshop will begin shortly. Today, the topic of the workshop would be Incident Response Fundamental, which is the workshop to get yourself ready for the upcoming training on the 22nd to the 24th of December. On the screen is the schedule of today. Right now, we are letting people into the meeting, and around 10 a.m. we'll start the workshop session. If you have any questions during the workshop, feel free to type the questions into the chat box. It's okay if you just want to ask the questions in Thai. I'll help you communicate with the speaker. Thank you.
สวัสดีผู้เข้าร่วมการอบรมที่เพิ่งเข้ามาใหม่อีกรอบนึงนะคะค่ะวันนี้นะคะจะขออนุญาตแจ้งกำหนดการอบรมอีกรอบนึงค่ะช่วงเวลา 9:50 ถึง 10 โมงหรือว่าเวลาในขณะนี้นะคะจะเปิดให้ผู้เข้าร่วมการอบรมเข้าร่วมระบบการประชุมในการอบรมค่ะช่วงเวลา 10 โมงถึง 11:45 นะคะเริ่มการอบรมค่ะ 11:45 ถึง 11:55 นะคะเปิดโอกาสให้ผู้เข้าร่วมการอบรมซักถามวิทยากรค่ะ 11:55 ถึงเที่ยงนะคะสรุปและรับฟังข้อเสนอแนะจากผู้เข้าร่วมการอบรมค่ะโดยช่วงท้ายนะคะจะขอความกรุณาทุกท่านนะคะช่วยทำแบบประเมินความพึงพอใจในการรับฟังการอบรมในวันนี้ด้วยค่ะเพื่อเป็นประโยชน์ต่อการปรับปรุงและพัฒนาการจัดอบรมครั้งต่อไปให้ดียิ่งขึ้นต่อไปค่ะ
Okay, good morning again. For those who just joined the training, we will begin the workshop within a couple of minutes. And okay, on the screen here, you will see the schedule of today's event. So around 10 a.m., we'll start the workshop session. During the workshop, if you have any questions, feel free to type the questions in the chat box. And around 11:45, it's going to be the Q&A session. And around 11:55, we will have a concluding remarks. And it's going to be the end of the training this morning. Oh, and at the end, we would like to ask you to fill in the satisfactory survey. It's going to help us improve the quality of the training for the future. Thank you.
สำหรับท่านที่เพิ่งเข้ามาใหม่นะคะกำหนดการอบรมนะคะแสดงทางภาพหน้าจอที่ได้แชร์สกรีนนะคะหากท่านมีคำถามที่อยากซักถามท่านวิทยากรระหว่างการอบรมนะคะสามารถพิมพ์ในช่องทางแชทบ็อกซ์ได้เลยค่ะสามารถพิมพ์ทั้งเป็นภาษาไทยและภาษาอังกฤษได้เลยค่ะขอบคุณค่ะ
I'm not sure if I understand correctly. It then has to log in the identity if you have the account and another how to import.
พี่แตงค่ะรบกวนเปิดไมค์ค่ะทำไม
ได้ยินเสียงน้องแซงไหมคะโอเคค่ะ
ได้ยินแล้วค่ะ
ค่ะ ระหว่างเอกสารประกอบการประชุมนะคะขณะนี้นะคะกำลังรีบดำเนินการค่ะหากได้รับเอกสารประกอบการประชุมแล้วค่ะจะรีบนำมาใส่ในไดรฟ์ที่แสดง QR code ดังกล่าวค่ะ ขออภัยในความไม่สะดวกมาณที่นี้ค่ะ บัดนี้นะคะได้เวลาอันสมควรสำหรับการอบรมค่ะดิฉันนางสาวฐานินีนพวงศ์นัทยาและคุณสิริขวัญชัยดิโลกทำหน้าที่เป็นผู้ดำเนินรายการในหัวข้อการอบรมวันนี้ค่ะขอเรียนเชิญท่านกวินบุญยปรีดีท่านวิทยากรการอบรมในวันนี้ค่ะ
ครับสวัสดีครับทุกท่านที่ร่วมงานวันนี้ผมชื่อกวินบุญยปรีดีวันนี้จะเป็นเทรนเนอร์ที่จะคุยเรื่อง Incident Response Fundamentals ประมาณ2ชั่วโมงนะครับขอบคุณครับเดี๋ยว share screen นะโอเคเห็นไหมครับ
เห็นค่ะ
โอเคขอบคุณมากครับตอนนี้เดี๋ยวผมเปลี่ยนเป็นภาษาอังกฤษนะครับแต่ว่าถ้ามีคำถามหรืออะไรก็พิมพ์ใน chat box ได้เลยในภาษาไทยหรือภาษาอังกฤษนะครับ Hello and good morning everyone. Thank you for attending today's training session. It's called Incident Response Primer Course. So this is in a partnership with the NCSA, an Australian government, led by Retrospect Labs. I am Retrospect Labs partner, attending and doing the training today. So before we start, I'd like to introduce myself. Again, my name is Kewin Bunyapridi or Kewin Bunyapridi. So I've been an information security practitioner for now more than 20 years. I began in about 1999, graduated my university. I got my Prinya 3 at University of Pennsylvania with economics, as you can see. I did a degree in finance and economics. However, I've always been a computer fan. So I used to work with computers when I was younger, a teenager, build computers as well. And then I got into IT shortly after I graduated. And then after that, I got my Binya Tool New York University in business management and information systems, more like a dual degree in IT and management. And then finally, I moved over to Singapore about more than 10 years ago. And I went to study actually and get my Bunya A in SMU. I haven't finished yet. I still need to complete my dissertation. I know it's been a long time, but you don't have to call me more yet. But my parents are looking forward to when I finish my Bunya A. In terms of my experience, so I've been in many companies, very small startups, about 30 คน, all the way up to big, huge enterprise corporations, about 4 แสนคน. So I've seen a lot of things happen. I've seen a lot of different types of programs and maturity levels. Across my professional certifications, I have it across the board from vendor-specific ones like Cisco, Checkpoint, Microsoft, as well as more general ones like Izaka C-Risk, Cloud Security Alliance, CCSK, and the ISC Squared CISSP. So I do have a breadth and depth of information. So today's session, we will focus on incident response, but feel free to ask me any questions, my experience, advice, and all that. I've had clients in critical infrastructure, manufacturing, energy, medical, financial services. I've also been in that environment as well. So I've been on both sides of the fence of consulting and also end user. So as background, this training course, again, is a primer course, just a very beginning where you will learn important aspects of incident response. I will help you introduce some methodologies and approaches, also some frameworks and tooling used in incident response or IR, and provide guidance on maybe some other platforms like secure case management platforms. And there is a hands-on component responding to a scenario on common incidents types as well. The ultimate goal today for everyone here attending is to build the awareness on what effective incident response involves, and to have you have the ability to drive proper processes, tools, and procedures. Okay, so let's get started. Incident response foundations. Let's look and see what's going on in the news today. So you know that if you look up cybersecurity and you look up attacks and you look up information security, the first things that come up in the news are always the attacks, right? So we know that organizations need to help boost up their online defenses as rising numbers of these cyber attacks against the public and private sectors indicate that data leaks and digital threats will become ever more commonplace. It's not going to go away. It's going to be always increasing these attacks. Even the NCSA has said, 200 pieces of critical information infrastructure in 7 sectors need to adopt necessary basic foundational measures to guard against these cyber attacks. In Thailand alone, Lai Muang Thai, there are several high-profile cyber attacks that have been reported recently, including ransomware, targeting some hospital back in September, a data leak of more than 13 million customers from e-commerce platforms, and cyber attacks on Bangkok Airways and AXA Insurance. A recent case, it also involves the public health ministry, in which a user, claimed to have 16 million hacked records of patient data to sell. So imagine that. Imagine the hit. Imagine the attacks, the concerns, the public trust on this. So one of my old bosses, my Chao Nai Gao, Ajahn Prinya Homanek, he had a really good quote to understand all these different cyber attacks and what's going on. So he's saying that, these cyber attacks become even more commonplace, and it's very hard to 100% defend against these attacks. So in terminology, I know most of you are in cybersecurity, maybe a couple of years, maybe 20, 30 years, but you know that at this time, it's not, you can't ask the question of if are you going to be attacked or if are you going to be hacked, it's when you're going to be hacked. So now that, every organization, especially if you're online, if you have a public presence, it's going to be a target. And hackers don't care who you are, big or small revenue, big revenue. If they have a way to attack you, to discover a chung wall in your network, they'll get in and they'll find what they can do to extort through money, extort through, ransomware. So Ajahn Prinya Homanek, he actually said, in ransomware, for example, he described a triple extortion step carried by these attackers against victims like yourselves. So he said the first starts when hackers place restrictions on data access. What they do in ransomware, right? And I'll show you a case study later. That ransomware, they will get into your network, and then they will encrypt the file, and then ask the victim to pay them to have the key to unlock the data. So if the victims have backup data and refuse to pay, the attacker would then, step 2, proceed to threaten and release the victim's sensitive data. So imagine if, like the case study on the hospital. A hospital got attacked by ransomware, all patient data got encrypted. And it's very sensitive data, right? Personal identifiable information, medical history. And imagine if that gets released, right? Imagine the litigation, the brand reputation damage to the hospital itself, the reputation and loss of the patient itself, if they have a serious disease or something and go public, imagine that. So if the victims number 3 still refuse to pay, the attacker will exploit this leaked data of this victim and maybe even try to contact the victim directly and say, hey, look, I have this patient, I have your data, I have your sensitive information. I'm going to release this unless you pay me. So that's kind of like a triple extortion. It's in summary, what I've seen in my experience that now it's hard to prevent attacks. And data leaks will happen more and more on a daily basis. And it's even getting more harder to trace and catch the hackers. But what can we do? It feels like hope lost. What we can do is prepare for it, right? Be ready. And that's what incident response is all about, right? It's getting ready for incidences like this. So by definition, what is incident response? So defined is incident response is an organized approach to manage a cybersecurity incident. I have to bold out, I have to focus on organized. Organized is really key. I have been in organizations, even large ones with like $1 million of tools and people and security teams. They didn't practice their incident response. They may have some sort of playbook ready, but they never really understood what to do. So once a hack happened, once we got hit by a malware or phishing, and then it started spreading in the network, people were panicking. The CISO was contacting the security operations. The CTO was contacting security. The CIO was contacting us directly. Desktop engineering was contacting us. It was a mess. So we were like really in disarray. We were like saying, what's going on? So that's why organization is key. So what organization means is you have a high degree of readiness to manage the variety of different incidences as they come in, whether it be a DDoS, malware, virus attack, a breach of events, insider threats. And basically, to summarize, the more you are prepared, the greater your capability to detect and analyze. And staying ready also involves performing lessons learned of these activities so you can improve on taking these findings to uplift your readiness, right? If you're like, took one day, if you're going to the office, right? What do you do every year? And what is the building mandate from a legal perspective? They mandate you have to do like at least one time a fire drill exercise, right? And why do we do that? Because we have to know exactly what to do if a real fire occurs, right? You don't panic, you don't run around, you don't knock down things, you don't go to wrong places, the wrong exit. You know exactly what to do, where to go, and calmly. So having this level of preparedness in incident response from a cyber perspective is just as important. So I wanted to share with you some of the incident types. Like I said, ransomware, BEC, business email compromise. I'm sure as cybersecurity professionals, you've heard that. That's a growing concern. So business email compromise, they impersonate maybe your supplier or your payroll third-party vendor and say, hey, look, please pay now, but they give you the wrong link, right? And you don't know. Maybe it's coming from a spoofed email from someone that you think you know, or a friend or a partner. And we don't know better, right? We're not prepared, and we send them the payment, and that's it. That's lost. That's gone. Phishing things from email, data breaches, denial of service, and network compromises when you're getting attacked and infiltrated. So what does incident response, IR, involve in terms of stages? So there's, according to the National Institute of Standards and Technology, there's about 4 stages that occur. And you see it in the cycle right here. Preparation, detection and analysis, containment, eradication, and recovery, and lastly, post-incident activity. So let's talk about these more in detail. So preparation is the first step. When you begin the process of securing your network, you have to be prepared for attacks which take place anytime. Like a die, you have no idea. Hackers don't take breaks, right? It could be a lot of times in my 20 years, more than 20 years of experience, I always find it when I'm working in security operations, like Friday evening, 5:00, 6:00 yen, ready to go home, ready for the weekend, go out with friends, go out with family. All of a sudden, something hits. Oh my gosh, 6:00, 6:00 yen on a Friday. They like to time it somehow, but it always happens that way a lot of times. And when it hits, you have to be prepared. You have to be ready. You can't just be like, okay, I'll deal with it on one na. If it's especially an infection of your critical server, right? If you're doing e-commerce, right, and you get hit, and then let's say even like a denial service on your e-commerce platform where you're serving, millions of customers a day, and then it goes down. You're losing revenue by the minute, right? They've done statistics analysis and saying, as an e-commerce platform, how much you lose per minute, hundreds of thousands of dollars, like 1, 2, 3 ล้าน ต่อ winati even. So, having that downtime is unacceptable, especially for e-commerce, for health, for hospitals, especially if you have, electricity or patient data or some things that are critical for people's lives. So you need to be prepared. So you never know when a bot gains access to your company data unless prepared. You not only need to plan strategy properly, but you should also learn how to do it and have immediate access to basic information. So say I get hit by malware, who to contact first? Do I have a third-party contractor as an incident response team to help bring it in? I have to contact them first. Do I have to contact help desk first? So all of this information is useful to help make a process of communication even faster and more efficient. And one of the most important components to prepare is backup and a disaster recovery. So all of you in cybersecurity, I know not necessarily there's a BCDR, it's under cyber, it's more of IT, but you need to interlock with IT and understand what is the methodology you use for disaster recovery and backup. So it's important to have, say, a DR server that can continue to serve business operations. So like I said before, in e-commerce, that goes down, completely shut off. Do you have a backup server to switch on hot standby right away, or a cold standby? You boot it up, takes a minute, and you can do that. You need to be ready. You need to do all that and have a backup and continue this business operations while you're doing investigating and recovering of the actual primary production server. So daily backups also very, very necessary because you have no idea when, right? It could be the next minute after you finish the daily backup. It could be during the daily backup. So having these backup snapshots, very key. Moving on to stage 2 or phase 2 is called detection and analysis. So proper detection and analysis is required for organizations to be prepared to respond to any incident, but should focus on preparing for incidences that use common attack vectors, things that that may be occurring, a virus attack, a DDoS attack, some things that are common attacks, right? Different types of incidences use different types of attack vectors and require different responses, right? An organization should always be aware of potential attack vectors. You have to know where is the vulnerabilities, where is the threats coming from, and face that and be ready, right? So if you have a castle wall, right, if you have a house, right, and you have a fence up, where's the main attack? If the fence is 10 feet high with spikes, with electric fencing, maybe the main attack is the doorway. So you have to put a little bit more focus and be ready at the door, right? So you have to look at signs or symptoms of the attack, like a sudden increase in attack count from maybe a specific IP address, or your network traffic all of a sudden like chalong, you don't know what's going on. It's like the bandwidth just all of a sudden went from 100 gigs to 100 megs, right? Or even pop-ups that happen on the endpoint. All of a sudden you get pop-ups everywhere from maybe your users or even on the server itself. So once you discover this type of abnormal signs, look for indicators through your security logs, network security devices, audit logs, web server logs, everything to assist in the further investigation. So during this detection and analysis is really important. So once you are equipped with the right data, you can perform further analysis of the security incident. And this stage, it would be easy if every indicator were guaranteed to be accurate. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. There's false positives. You know that as cybersecurity professionals, there's always going to be false positives. You need to fine tune your rules to understand, what's right, what's a false, what's detected wrongly but alerted. You have to fine tune. Not every product is very accurate, right? So you have to understand even the insecure daily practices that you do. Human mistakes, misconfigurations, those are one of the biggest issues that occur in terms of incidences as well. So in this case, if something like that happens, you'll need more time, right? You need more time that's required for the IT security team or sysadmins to analyze and investigate the problem. So you should always maintain industry best practices to maximize the accuracy of indicators as well as the availability of all logs. Okay, moving on to phase 3, we're talking about containment, eradication, and recovery. So in this phase of the plan, once a security event is verified, you must analyze symptoms and plan a strategy on how to recover and correct. So first is containment, right? You need to gather evidence from audit logs, email messages, malicious executable files, and this evidence, together with timestamps, date stamps, location, it's really required to properly analyze and investigate the chain of events. So let's take an example. So a lot of people in, say, CSI, right? Crime scene investigation. I'm not sure if you watch murder mysteries or murder movies. A lot of times, what they do if they find someone that's, murdered in a building or a house, what do they do first, right? They have to compile the evidence. They need to understand what happened. So they can't touch it, they can't interrupt. So what they need to do is to understand, isolate the incident, maybe perhaps look at, how did this person die? Is it a stab wound? Is it a bullet wound? Where's he laying? How much blood is coming out? It's all this stuff. And similar to in the cyber world, you need to do the same. Imagine it as you're doing a murder investigation. What do you have to do? You have to collect evidence. You have to do it well. And also in terms of, understanding the situation, visibility of understanding and building this kind of storyboard and understanding what the events happened. So after that, you eradicate components from the incident, install antivirus to kill off the malware. If it's a malware infection, for example, what are you going to do to stop the spread? What are you going to do to kill it off? So oftentimes a lot of incident response professionals would use some proprietary tools. They have their own EDR agent or an antivirus agent that's readily available. If the one on the system doesn't work or is ineffective, they maybe have an agent that they can install, rescan, and then detect it and eliminate it, right? That's in certain scenarios. And then finally, you recover and restore the systems to a healthy state. So you need to not only investigate, eradicate, but you need to recover the system. Once a primary production server is recovered with, as much confidence as you can bring that and switch it back to the primary server. So the last phase is called post-incident activity. So this is the last step. It's one of the most important parts of the incident response process, but a lot of times I've seen in my previous clients and other organizations, other bodhisattvas, they often neglect it. They don't really follow through. And why is that? I think they oftentimes feel like, okay, incident is finished. We solved the problem, write a report to management, and that's it. Close the book, set. Sure. However, you need to learn, right? You need to understand what happened. What can we do to do things better, not only from the process, but how do we solve this problem more efficiently and also prevent it from happening in the future, right? So holding a post-event meeting to discuss the impact, it's a good start towards future incident handling. So this meeting provides a chance to review the incident, intervention methods, and results. So you have to ask your team, perhaps everyone who was involved, a couple of key questions. You have to ask, like, did the IT team and management perform the right steps during the incident? Was there proper and timely communication? Were there any steps that weren't taken that could potentially speed up the recovery process, make it faster, right? Solve the problem faster, eradicate, isolate, get rid of it, and recover faster. What corrective actions could be taken to further improve the investigation, analysis, and recovery process? Maybe you're using a tool today, maybe you're not. Maybe you're using an open source tool that you haven't really fine-tuned and gotten enough support for. Perhaps maybe you should be looking at a different solution that does maybe data collection, evidence even better. Some of these tools I'll share with you later in today's slides. So overall, this process can help an organization improve efficiency and effectiveness in handling future incidences. So apart from preparing an incident report that summarizes the incident details, the steps taken, and the discoveries during the incident process, it needs to be reviewed. It needs to be worked together with the organization, maybe get everyone together and say, hey, what did we do? How can we do it better? And overall, in summary, it will make your security controls stronger. And just to note at the last part of this, all these stages is cyclical. They all are interdependent and always changing because the threat landscape is, right? You may have found an incident, you prepare, you find a malware, you eradicate, you restore. But what happens if you haven't found all of it, right? Then you have to do it again. You have to prepare, you have to investigate. If more machines are infected, you have to do it again. So it's a constant ongoing four-phase approach. Okay, so let's move on. We've defined what is incident response. What is IR? Now let's talk about what is the main outcome. What are we trying to achieve besides, recovering from addressing an incident and recovering from it in a faster, more efficient time? It is overall for us to work, for the business. We're trying to minimize the impact of the incident to the affected organization, to your company, right? And I want to explain a little bit more on what is the impact. What impacts are we talking about? It's not just the systems itself. It's not maybe the downtime or ransomware, the encrypted data. It's all about, the impact of your network. Say that, you've recovered, restored. Do you have confidence? Are you nung loy % confident that you've taken the hacker out, of the equation, and you've restored and you're continuing as business as usual? Are you confident? Are you 100%? That's an impact. The second thing is reputation, right? You're shopping on e-commerce platforms, in Muay Thai, always Shopee, Lazada, right? Nai, Shopee, yeah. So Shopee and Lazada, right? They're always been kukang. Imagine if you're shopping on both sides, and of course you're looking at the prices, compare, and like, okay, cheaper in Lazada by Lazada, cheaper in Shopee by Shopee. But what happens one day, like Pugni, Shopee don't hack, right? And then they said that every customer account or record is stolen. Their account, their password, even credit cards that are stored on the website. How likely are you going to shop again right away? But not really. Me? No, I'd be like, bye-bye. I'd be like, yeah, let's take off all the info, maybe just go to Lazada. So it's reputation, right? Impacts the customer relationship. Next thing is psychological. What I mean by psychological, right? So I'll give you a prime example. There was a website called Ashley Madison. And if you're in security, you probably know about what happened. But just to share, Ashley Madison's website, where, well, I guess you would say people would find relationships with other people. However, they're already married. So, it's kind of like not a very ethical thing, but, it exists. Services like this exist. So what happened was Ashley Madison website and their applications and all that got hacked. So a hacker was able to steal all their user data. So imagine that. I mean, if you were on that site or not. If you're on that site and your user data got hacked and got leaked, what happened was a really bad outcome. There were a lot of divorces, right? Even resignations. Like companies that found out that their employees were on this site, were fired. And even there were suicides. Because of, the psychological impact of getting found out of this. So psychological is a big impact as well. And lastly, but important as well, is safety. I've cited examples of hospitals being hacked, right? Or even in critical infrastructure, energy. So let's take a prime example of energy. So about 5-6 years ago, the Ukraine power grid got hacked, and all the energy, they couldn't supply energy. So the energy grid went down. So power to more than 300,000 people, gone. So imagine the safety. I mean, especially if it's in wintertime and it's very cold and your electricity goes down, you have no heat, you have no electricity. Imagine the people and the safety, the physical safety of these people. So we want to minimize all of this impact. And how do we do this? How do we minimize impact? So let's look at some of these points I've written down here. You need to start determining the extent of the incident. What happened? What host got impacted? What data was stolen? Dwell time. Dwell time is basically, if you're in security operations, dwell time, how long the hacker has been in your network. Do you know the fact that most hackers, by average, are in a network for 6 ดือน before they're discovered? They're in your network for 5-6 months. Just going around, looking at the data, maybe trying to get admin privileges for systems, looking at the keys to the kingdom, trying to hack into the database, and people don't know. So we need to understand the dwell time, how long people have been in there or hackers have been in there. We also need to identify the types of vulnerabilities exploited. And where do you have to protect against? You have to identify the TTPs. So TTPs, I'll explain later in today's slides if you know what TTPs are. But TTP is called techniques and procedures. And that's kind of like a methodology and way hackers get in and how to identify these types of methods that get in. You also have to determine the current state of the actor or adversary. Like I said, active or not. That means, okay, you clean up an incident, everything's recovered, everything's good. But, do you have 100% confidence that the actor, the attacker, is gone? Can he still have a back door to go back in later? You have to determine that. You also have to determine and leverage threat intel. Now, threat intelligence is very important, right? Without knowing information, without having this kind of knowledge, you don't know what you don't know, right? Maybe there is some sort of threat intelligence saying a hacker group is attacking the entire financial services sector with a certain type of malware, that kind of hacks into these databases or financial systems, common financial systems that maybe banks may use. You need to know that, and you need to know what type of protections are against this certain type of malware. And this is published maybe in threat intelligence feeds, public or subscribe. So you need to leverage that. You also need to communicate effectively and accurately with those that need to know. Now, this is important, communication, right? Like I said, in my experience, when we don't hack and a malware or virus came into the network and people were like told by Toma, like who to talk to, who to communicate with. You need to have a solid communication plan. You also need to support other parts of the business with this. So say you're a public company, right? And you got news that you got hacked. In the US, it's required by law to disclose if you got hacked or if you got breached or your data got stolen within a certain amount of time. I believe it's 72 ชั่วโมง, something like that, about 3 days, within 3 days. So you need to work with maybe the media team or legal team to tell them what to say, right? Or what the situation is. You need to share that. How do you do that? So you need to support other parts of the business, such as the media, HR, corporate communications, internal and external as well. What do the employees think? You need to work with internal communications on that. And also you need to remediate effectively. This is really good, important as well. Remediation, there's many different types, which I'll share with you later, which I have gone through as well. But it basically is doing things that matter and avoiding further mistakes to make the situation even worse. Okay, so just to summarize, minimizing impact. If you look in this circle, minimizing the impact and damage will lead to even protecting your revenue, your bottom line of your business, right? You minimize the impact or downtime, say from an incident from a DDoS attack, right? On e-commerce, you protect your revenue, right? You protect the bottom line. By there, you also protect your reputation and trust from your shareholders or your users or your customers. From there, you can even strengthen your security controls from there and improve upon it and ensure business continuity that your operations continues. Okay, I will I'll take a pause for any questions. Are there any questions in the chat or you want to ask me ตอนนี้ พิมพ์หรือพูดในภาษาไทยได้นะครับ
ค่ะนะคะก็จบไปช่วงหนึ่งนะคะตอนนี้วิทยากรเปิดโอกาสให้ถามคำถามค่ะมีท่านใดที่มีคำถามเพิ่มเติมไหมคะสามารถพิมพ์เข้ามาได้เนาะหรือว่าจะ raise hand นะคะแล้วก็ยกมือถามได้เลยOkay, seems like there are no questions right now. คุณโกเอน
Okay, ครับขอบคุณมากครับ So I will continue on. So with this knowledge that we have now, the main outcome of incident response, why we're doing it, what it is, there are common mistakes I want to share that you need to avoid. So an investigation itself during incident response can be sabotage, can get worse if you do the wrong things or even if no actions are taken. So, for example, loss of telemetry or volatile data. That's an example. So imagine you got hit by a malware virus. You have identified one system that has been infected. What is the first thing you think you would do that you should do, right? You isolate the system, right? You cut off the port or you cut off the network port to spread, to make it spread if possible, right? And some people even say reboot. It's always reboot that always solves the problem, right? ที่แก้ไขแต่ว่า a lot of evidence, a lot of data can be seen in perhaps the random access memory, the RAM memory. A lot of malware occurs within there. And if you reboot, for example, if you act too quickly without understanding the situation, then you lose the data, you lose the evidence. Then you lose maybe any procedures further to understand the situation, how to prevent it. So that's really important. The next thing is bad operational security, OPSEC. And I'll get this into more details in the next slide, bad operational security. Next thing is ineffective remediation. Like I said, there's different types of remediation. There's good, bad, and no remediation at all. And that will be shared later. And even after that, after remediation, after recovery, no follow-up after remediation. Lessons learned. How do you do things better? What can we get out to improve our situation, strengthen our controls, improve communications? Really key. So I'd like to share with you some of the biggest mistakes to avoid that I've seen, that I've personally been involved in my many years, is that many companies, large and small, not just small, right? They lack an incident response playbook, IR playbook. We will go into playbooks in much more detail later. But basically, incident response is a well-planned process for the security team. And it must be customized for your organization because every security event must be maybe ticketed and tracked by a relevant category, subcategory applicable to your business. There may be frameworks, processes, best practices that you can apply as a template, but every single organization is different. So there's going to be different playbooks you have to do. Maybe a different ticketing system you use, maybe a different team you need to contact. You need to have a IR playbook. Okay. What I've also seen, one of the biggest mistakes in many companies is there's not enough logging. So logging, audit logs, storing logs, teach a get log, right? It's really important, right? And it's not just for regulatory compliance, right? But it's also to understand the situation. Like I said before, an attacker, the average dwell time has been right? That they've been in the network before they're discovered. Imagine if you have logs for only the past 30 days. What about the other, 150 days that the hacker was in there? You don't have that information enough to build the case or build and gather enough evidence, right? So I've seen a lot of companies make the mistake of not logging enough, right? Even SOX compliance, for example, if you're in financial services, I think they do require 7 years of log retention, right? That's a lot of logs, but that's to show the safety and going way back to understand if something happened, years before, what can we do? What can we build in terms of evidences and cases, right? And lastly, one of the other key things, biggest mistake to avoid that I've seen is not conducting a complete analysis through forensics, right? So when you're doing investigations, in a forensics team, like I said, in CSI, you need to have a very strong forensics process, how you gather evidence, how you retain evidence, how you procure and preserve evidence. And from there, where do you store the evidence for later? If you're in a legal battle, right? If it's an insider threat, maybe an insider threat, someone that's a disgruntled employee, might apologize their increase in their salary, or maybe they didn't get that promotion. Insider threats are just as dangerous or even more dangerous than outside external hackers because, they're already in the inside. And imagine the bad employee or the insider, they can cover things up. They can erase logs if they have that access. So you need to have proper forensics processes and tools to be able to rebuild this kind of case. So I spoke about operational security or OPSEC. So I need to share with you OPSEC. So in essence, the definition of OPSEC is about enforcing procedures and policies to protect your sensitive information from falling into the hands of the adversary. Now, what does that mean, right? OPSEC, this term actually came from the U.S. military during one of their wars. It was basically what happened was the U.S. was seeing that their adversaries, the enemy, was able to predict and anticipate their strategies and tactics. Even though they knew that they weren't intercepting any communications, they didn't have threat intelligence to maybe translate what they were saying. So the conclusion was that the U.S. forces, they themselves were inadvertently revealing vital information to the enemy somehow. So giving information more to other people or the publics or, accidentally leaking. So that's what OPSEC is about, is to understand who only needs to know or be involved in every case, right? So if you don't do this, if you don't have a good operational security process, right, it will lead to maybe changes in the actor. They find out, they found out that that they know that how they got in, right? They basically find out what happened. and basically find out, some of the tactics and techniques that were discovered by you, and they would change their methodology. They change the way that they attack you. Maybe they go into a different way. Maybe they use a different 0 day. We don't know. Also, like, they could like just disappear. They could like go dark. They're like, okay, these guys know that we are in their network. Let's pull out, right? And then we'll wait maybe a day, a week, a month, or two with this backdoor and come back in. So having good operational OPSEC is really important, right? So like I said, OPSEC failures can come from, revealing sensitive information to those that need to know without the need to know. Uploading files maybe to public platforms. What I mean by that is, I know a lot of times during analysis, if you get hit by malware, right, and you have collected the malware, a lot of companies, and I've been in them, we've used maybe a website called VirusTotal. You can upload that malware into their portal, and they will, provide you with the hash. They provide you with information on this malware to identify it, which is good. However, if you're uploading it within your own network, right? Perhaps you're disclosing more than you should. Maybe VirusTotal itself, maybe you don't know if someone's watching the VirusTotal and where the origins of the malware are coming from. Maybe they found out, they see that from the source IP, your company uploaded this malware, so they perhaps think that you have been infected, don't infect with this malware, right? So that's more information than you should be giving the public, right? Anything to basically tip off the actor that they've been detected. So you need to really be careful on good operational security practices, only giving the people knowledge that need to know. Okay. So given all this information now, going up to now this slide, I've shared with you things that you shouldn't do, right? You can concentrate then on things that you can do on the initial start of an incident response program. So what do you do to start? You basically start the program. You have the plan. As long as you have the plan in place, right? You need to identify the host, devices, the data of interest. Like I said, if you don't store logs in a long enough time, maybe increase that to 60 all of a sudden, because you don't know, maybe the incident will take several days, several hours, several weeks, several months. I've seen that happen. An incident has taken 6 ดือนto remediate. It's taken a long time. So you may need to consider increasing the log retention of all the devices, right? Maybe on your firewalls, your routers, your switches, your endpoints as well. You need to have that ability to increase the duration for storing the logs, right? You need to also secure access to key personnel, those who know, and those are experts at doing incident response. You need to activate them right away. Those that know the systems itself. Maybe perhaps you have a mapping of all assets, right? You have an asset inventory of all your servers, of all your endpoints, right? Maybe there is a point of contact or person in charge, PIC, in your organization of who is a system owner, right? Not from the infra perspective, but from an asset perspective. Who owns this server? And if that gets infected, you need to contact this person first, right? In a large organization, there's maybe multiple owners of different systems. You need to have a good asset management plan to identify who it is. You also basically need to determine means to acquire the host, data of interest. How are you going to pull that data in? How are you going to get the data once a host gets infected, right? Are you going to pull it in? Are you going to share the malware? Are you going to forward the phishing? How are you going to do that, right? Forwarding it off to someone else? Not a good idea. So you have to determine the ways on how to get that data, right, in a safe and secure manner. You also really have to document what has happened. Documentation, especially during incident response, very, very important. Just like I said, during a murder case, you need to document, timestamp, date stamp, location stamp, everything and anything that's happened. Believe me, it's hard. Manยากนะครับที่จะ document ทุกอย่าง. You have to have really good program and project management skills be very detailed oriented, because, for example, if you get hit by insider threat again, and this insider employee, stole information or stole money and stuff like that, you need to, of course, firing them, you need to sue them if you need to. A lot of, US likes to sue a lot of people. So you need to build this case. You need to build proper evidences. You need to document what happened at which time, when, how. And once you have this, you'll have a stronger case, right? So documentation, really important as well. And lastly, you need to establish protocols. Now, protocols I will explain in the next slide. Overarching thing to wrap it up, again, operational security or OPSEC must be adopted straight away. In case that you need to preserve the information, give it to only those that need to know, and prevent the incident from getting worse. So focusing on protocols. Protocols basically need to be established for OPSEC and general management of the investigation. Basically what protocols is to build this set of point of contacts, categorize them, who needs to know and who doesn't need to know, how often we report and who to report to, the type of communication method. For this example, I say out of band is because, look, if your network is hacked, hack, right? You don't know what system are infected. Maybe your entire network is infected. Your communication systems, your chat programs, everything, right? Would you continue talking on this network with your employees or the investigation group? Probably not. And you shouldn't, right? Because maybe the hacker is sniffing traffic and seeing everything that's being talked about them, right? So there's got to be a way to do out-of-band communications. Maybe you have a different phone, different Tolasat, or a different chat message system that's off the network, off the grid, not connected to your network in any way. Think about that. You have to have a different ways of communication out of band. So that's a different protocol you need to consider. Also, storage of investigation-related files. So this is important, where you store your data, where you store the investigation. Here's an example. Here's a real-life example of what happened in one of my clients in my Nuka. He built a Google Doc and listed everything that he's found so far during an incident response investigation. He found out the source IP of the hacker. He found out what ports he was using. He found out the malware he was using to infect the system. So he wrote it all down. Pim Tuk Yang, record Tuk Yang, and Dokni. He didn't know that the hacker had access to that share. He didn't secure that share. So whatever he was writing about this hacker, the hacker was seeing. So he knew exactly what the victim knew. And you know what he did at the end when the investigation was close to the end? He pulled that data, he pulled it out. He made a copy and didn't walk by. So having a protocol, a strong protocol to understand where you're storing this investigations and all the data and files is really important. It will prevent you from being sidetracked and interrupted as well. Like I said, if you don't have persons, point of contacts, people to keep it strict, need to know, everyone's going to ask, what's going on. The business will ask, CEO will ask, and it's happened. So you need to have these protocols, strong protocols over time, right? And these will change during the course of this investigation. What I mean is it's changing because if, say, an investigation spreads, right, and it's spreading to the general public, maybe your internal users, right, the endpoints, it's spreading, then they all have to need to know, right? They'll need to know, understand what's going on. So you need to change protocol and open the aperture, open the communication pipe, and let them know. So this will change over time depending upon the incident. So to be organized, we need to have in this program a plan, incident response plan. And what does this plan include and reference? So, the plan basically includes analysis of the threat environment, identification of the key assets, data, and critical systems, how severe these assets are. So basically, if it's an asset where it's an endpoint of a person within, probably administrative assistant, that doesn't have access to much, then you can put it on a lower severity rating. However, maybe it's a endpoint that the CEO uses. He's putting his balance sheets. He's sharing his, profitability or what the next quarter plan is. That's critical. You need to understand the severity rating of the asset itself in the data. You need to basically have a plan with the keys, roles, and responsibilities, including who does what, who is who does what in a process, in our plan, and also the communication plan, how to alert, how to manage media, how often to do it. Say that, e-commerce sites goes down, the CEO is calling you, every minute. You have to establish a protocol and a plan to say, look, Mr. CEO, big boss, I'm going to contact you every 10 minutes. Or I'm going to contact you every 30 minutes, something like that. So you need to have a good plan ahead. You also have to have good toolings and capabilities, both internal and external. So tools across the whole process, how to identify, how to scan the network. You have a vulnerability scanner. What type of scanner are you going to use? How many scanners do you have? Where you're scanning from. Also, case management applications. Where are you going to store your case? Where you're going to store the information? Should you store it on your shared drive? Should you store it on a proprietary application? And much more. So I wanted to show you this, that NIST itself does have a computer security incident handling guide. So this special publication, 800-61 revision 2, you can look this up as well. I'll share these slides at the end so you don't have to snapshot or pin long by. So breaking down the plan itself, like I said, there's several different things, but how does every plan look? While like you have a policy, you say in cybersecurity, you have an information and cybersecurity policy for your organization, right? It's an overall policy. Under each policy, big policy, right? It would break it down to say, here is a specific policy for, clean desk policy, or insider threat policy. What happens? What you do? And under each policy, you'll have guides, procedures, processes, working instructions, basically underneath. So it's kind of like a big thing broken by little subsets. So similar to a policy, information security policy, we have plans. So an incident response plan normally has different types of instances, right? And the corresponding playbooks underneath. So say that you have an incident type of phishing. In every phishing exercise, you basically understand, what type of incident it is and what type of playbook you need to execute. And under each playbook under that, in the blue, you have some sort of common activities that occur, right? You may understand if a phishing attempt happens, who to communicate with, what are the common activities you need to communicate with, what type of scanning you need to do, what tools you use, also what type of data to acquire, what applications and case management systems to use. So there are common activities underneath each incident type. And basically below that, as a foundation, right, you need to know basically the resources, who to contact again, what type of asset list you have readily available to identify this system got infected, whether assets are connected to this system, right? Maybe a server, an AD server got infected. All the systems may be infected, right? You need to understand that. Task lists and also, different types of storage containers. Where are you going to secure your offsite storage and data? So all these common activities will be referenced as well. So you can kind of see in an organized fashion, this overall security plan, the type of incidences, the common activities that occur under each incident, and finally, all the resources you have available. So that's kind of like what the incident response plan breakdown should be looking like. So once you have this playbook, once you understand what you have, what are the steps that should be taken in each relevant playbook? These are the most common steps about SIP steps right now. You need to create the case. You need to identify the impacted hosts. You need to enumerate them to understand the purpose. What is normal for them, right? You create a baseline. And then if there's something abnormal what's odd. You need to kind of collect that data. You need to pull out key artifacts from the data itself and for analysis, right? And you need to also build the timeline of events. You need to build the associated TTPs and indicators that indicate what happened. Is there an odd IP, suspicious IP coming from a different source, unknown source? So with these findings, you need to leverage threat intel. ACSC, this was a partnership with Australian cybersecurity. So you can use NCSA in Thailand basically to help on this. Maybe contact them if they do have some relevant information to understand the situation or the incident more. And even your friends, your peers, to obtain additional context. When I was working at a financial services firm ประมาณ15-16 ปีที่แล้ว my เจ้านายใหญ่ so he was the SVP of Information Security, and I was working as a security operations manager at the time. We got hit by a malware. First person he actually called was his Pariya. His Pariya was working as the head of information security for another bank. You can call it frenemies, right? But it's the same industry and sector. So he leveraged threat intel from his own family member, but industry to understand what's going on. He picked up the phone and say, "Hey, do you see something like this similar?" And what happened was she did. So there was a attack going on with a common malware Trojan banking application Trojan, basically, that was infecting all these financial systems across the U.S. banks. So we were able to work together with other banks right away to get this and understand the situation. So having this threat intel, very, very useful. Build your network, build capabilities, reach out to special interest groups to get this additional intel so you can build the case more strongly. And with the best understanding of the incidents, you can build the remediation plan, what to do next, what controls to apply, what configurations you need to change or update, or even buy sometimes. You execute the remediation plan, and then after that, step 10, you monitor the environment. You say, okay, we finished, we recovered, everything's kind of BAU, back to normal, back to usual, back business as usual. But you need to watch it for a bit because you don't know if you remediated 100%. Maybe the hacker is still waiting, and saying, okay, he thinks we're gone. Let's do it again. So you need to monitor an event. And then once you are confident that incident is okay after a period of time, then you perform a retrospective lessons learned. What happened? How do we do it better? What to do better? What to improve upon, our controls to prevent it from happening in the future. So I've spoken a lot. I will take a pause here. ถ้ามีคำถามตอนนี้ก็ raise hand หรือ chat ได้เลยนะครับ ไม่ได้ยิน
Okay, sure, I'm here. นะคะถ้ามีคำถามก็ถามขึ้นมาได้เลยนะคะ one thing could be like good lead questions for the audience, like who makes the call for these steps? Like it's not necessary that they are the same group of people, right?
You mean like
approaches in investigations, like who make these calls?
Well, it's primarily the incident response team, the team dedicated to initiate if something happens. There's usually a dedicated incident response team within IT security or the information security group that can get activated right away. Or it could be maybe your company is too small, you don't have this capability, or you may have contracted a third-party partner to say, we have retainer services with you guys. Something happened, call them. They'll kickstart the situation right away. So maybe this whole step is not taken by the company at all. Is taken by the partner.
Okay. Yeah. นะคะสำหรับท่านใดที่มีคำถามเพิ่มเติมไหมคะวันนี้เนาะเรายังไม่จบนะคะเดี๋ยวจะมีเพิ่มเติมอีกนะให้ท่านวิทยากรท่านได้หายใจหายคอสักนิดนึงนะคะ just for a couple of seconds would be okay, right? Probably like sip your coffee first นะคะถ้าเกิดว่า ถ้าท่านใดนะคะมีคำถามสามารถพิมพ์เป็นภาษาไทยก็ได้นะคะเดี๋ยวพิธีกรจะช่วยสื่อสารกับวิทยากรให้นะคะ
Okay.
โอเคค่ะนะคะ alright okay one moment please
Yes.
misstep okay okay sure there is one question in the chat box from คุณอุรัชยาค่ะ when we talk about the misstep on not enough logging could you
Yes.
elaborate more on how much is enough
There's no hard set rule on how much is enough, right? Because again, we don't understand at the very start what happens. Like I said, it could easily be 6 months that this hacker has been in play. It could easily be in just maybe one day. In my experience, generally, if you say you only kept on SAPSIP1 for logs, I would easily say increase that 3 times. Right? I would spread, within this month, how much to investigate. I would spread it 6 months. So maybe 3 months before, and then have the capability to collect 3 months after, or even 5 months back. So it really depends. I know it's a cost factor too, right? If you increase the log size and kept storage logs, there may be a cost element. So you need to work and understand that too. How much is it going to cost? If you say like I want to get nung fee, right, over the next few months, or I want to pull back, it's going to cost you a lot of money, right? So you have to gauge that priority and risk. If it's going to cost you $1 million to get logs like half doing, right, it's not worth it, right? But if you have a low cost way to do it, I would say increase it at least double the current amount that you have, triple to be safe, because you just don't know. And it depends also on the scenario, right? If it's a virus, VEC, something like that, if it's something more complex, you discover that's discovered by a hacker group, an APT group, some that's very state-sponsored, maybe you have to increase it a lot more because they may have been in your network for years. You don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. There is also another question from Kun Urachaya as well. So do you have any suggestion of how to build a trust back after the incident?
Okay. So if you say trust, let's take it 2 sides. Trust for your shareholders, external people, right? Your brand reputation. Let's say your hotel, you have a hotel chain and got hit, right? And they said, okay, I don't want to stay in this hotel chain anymore. The trust is lost, right? It takes time. It does take time. You can't right away say, you can trust us 100%. Because we got hit. You have to be as open and visible as you can in certain aspects and share what happened. In my personal experience, like customer trust is more readily regained if you're very transparent to say what happened. And you don't say like you don't close off your doors and say like, oh yeah, we got hacked. So what? Just come work, come buy more stuff. You have to companies that share what happened, retrospect and share with the public and say, look, we got hit by this actor group. This is kind of the things we've done to help out, the steps we've taken, the controls we improved. You don't have to apologize, but you have to say like we've made best efforts to do better, right? We partner with more trusted people or incident response personnel to improve the remediation and prevent this from happening in the future. Do steps like that to regain their trust, right? And over time, they see that nothing happens, then you'll be okay.
All right, thank you. There's also another question, one more question for this break before you continue. It's from Group Captain Jadet. He would like to know, okay, so his question was, cyber incident response plan needs high support from top management. How do you gain that support from them?
So I'll give you an example. So when I was a CEO of a company, startup, I reported to the board of directors every month. And I was living and breathing balance sheets. So, the biggest concern for the board of directors and the CEO is the bottom line, right? The revenue. If you can tell them and talk about the situation incidents, what is the threat, if you do not have an incident response handling plan, right? If you go down, how much will you potentially lose? I was head of this company that was serving clients in financial services, in energy, in manufacturing, right? If we went down, they lost visibility of what's going on. So they lost capability to maybe even operate sometimes. Imagine, how much they lose per hour, per day, if they can't serve their clients, right? If energy goes down. Look at not only the potential loss of revenue from your side, but also financial penalties from maybe the government or regulatory bodies. You got hit by something, you didn't recover fast enough. Asiblan Lien penalty. What is that worth to the board of directors, right? Investing maybe 1% of that and having a proper incident response handling team to minimize that threat, I think it's well worth it. You have to talk dollars and cents to them, Kap.
Okay, make them see how big is the loss, right? Okay,ค่ะ. Thank you so much,ค่ะ. I think that's all for the little pause here, and also Kun Urashaya would like to say thank you as well for your answer,นะคะ. Great answer, and also Kun Urashaya gave you thumbs up as well. ค่ะ.
I'd like to show you a quick incident response plan example. So I'll share, this slides will be shared, so you don't need to take a photo. This is an example from McKinsey. So this is an IR plan. This includes as many as 8 sections. So like I said, generally the approach is maybe 10, 11. Here's something that McKinsey put in. They maybe crunched up some steps. But you have to understand that most useful plans like this include artifacts, procedural guides, playbooks, checklists in each and every stage on what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. So for each data type and incident type, the playbook charter would outline the objectives and team operating models. So if you have everything planned out, played out, have it very easy, the checklist, and here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things to do. If this certain incident occurs, it will make your incident response plan very strong, very efficient, makes your plan and remediation faster and more efficiently. Okay. Data acquisition. So a little stress on here. So one of the things, like I said, to respond effectively, you do need to have the right data to analyze, right? You can't just collect every single log data and stuff like that from all of the net. You need to kind of focus and understand where is this guy coming from, because 1, too many logs, right? Too much noise. And 2, you need to really focus in and minimize that time of the infection to remediation to recovery. So this is really important in looking at the logs from your hosts, your network, your firewall, your proxies, your web. And the size does vary. But the problem is if you don't have this, it's not, you wouldn't have the data to find out and build this kind of track of case to understand what happened. Volatile memory. That's another thing I gave you as an example, right? Perhaps the way you acquire the data, maybe you cannot reboot it right away. You can isolate the host if it's infected, but if you turn it off, the data can be lost. So you have to find a way to acquire the data, capturing it, maybe with a specific tool, snapshot the data, right? Pull off all the data from the random access memory or the volatile memory and be able to capture it there. The network traffic, having a full net flow, understanding baseline of your activity, what's going on, and anything that's out of the ordinary, something that's like really weird, could be an indicator of this hacking group or this hacker. And also the disk space. You have to really be very wary of the disk space itself, because log collection, fine, the right logs, fine, but the size of the logs too, right? The disk space. My computer right now, MacBook Pro, I think I have terabytes, 2 terabytes of storage. That's a lot of data, especially if you think about snapshot the data, upload it to a online share. How long is that going to take? It could be large. It could take hours, it could days. Maybe during that time, when you store the data out to investigate later, maybe it's too late, right? So you need to really be aware of the storage size of the disk. Here's an example of a playbook or a flow chart of a playbook. So if you play sports or learn sports, if you do football, right? In US, I'm a Thai American, เป็นคนไทยแท้แต่ว่าเกิดและโตที่อเมริกา I call it soccer. But football. So what do these great sports teams and incident response teams have in common? Firstly, they need multiple game plans, strategies which respond and adapt to their opponent's tactics, right? If a soccer team or football team sees that, a football team is doing some certain play, they're being more aggressive, what do? You have to have a different strategy, right? They maybe have a defensive tactic or strategy in place to defend against some very offensive strategy. Same thing. If they become defensive, then you go more offensive. So same thing here. So it takes a lot of practice and a different variety of scenarios to train your responses under these high pressure conditions, right? So this is a flow chart showing different types of playbooks. Ransomware, malicious code, phishing, account or email compromise, the host endpoint compromise. What happens, the flow chart into the data loss? What do you do? What type of steps you take in decisions you make to get to the plan itself? So another good thing is containment flow chart. During the containment phase in the IR playbook. So this basically represents, kind of what decisions are made. The diamonds are decision trees. Can you isolate safely the host? If you say yes, isolate the host, then you go into additional containment required. No, containment successful. So having these flow charts within these playbooks, very easy. Makes it very fast and efficient in how you address or remediate or contain something, right? Containment actions, what do you do? And then anything required, yes, if it's still happening, then you go back and do it again until it's complete and successful. So I talked about playbooks, IR playbooks, having playbooks, many playbooks, right, of different incident types. A lot of people may have that check mark, right? Be compliance, right? And then you just check mark and say, oh, I have it. But a lot of times I've seen my organizations that I've worked in don't test it, right? How are you going to know how effective your playbook is if you don't test it, right? Go back to the fire drill exercises. You need to test. You need to do these fire drills, practice, right? And to make it work. Maybe you're going the wrong staircase. Maybe some people don't know what's going on or know fully the information. You need to test. So testing playbooks, testing the flow charts, please do this. Or else if you assume too much and you just have it for the sake of having it, then you'll fail. I've seen it fail. I've seen it not do well because they have it. They just put it into a store drive and they just say, okay, ไม่เป็นไร มีแล้ว ไม่ต้องสอนไม่ต้องฝึกหัด right? So how do we start? Some of the things that I want to help you out with. Here are some recommended playbook tools that I've used in the past and also even told my clients kind of good suggestions. So flexibleir.com has a Kanban or Kabana style board that does playbooks. And this is really great. I know it's man legหน่อยแต่ว่า this is a snapshot of what you do in each phase. Investigate, contain, analyze, and all that stuff in each stage from left to right, sidebar. So flexibleir.com, look that up. Fantastic place to get you started to start building playbooks. Even GitHub and Jira, if you use this type of ITSM ticketing system, they do have some sort of boards like this you can build. Some guides from NIST again. There's some great guides here, snapshot. I'll give you the link as well in the slides. But basically, these are key recommendations presented in the NIST document for handling incidences and type of the flowcharts of what to do and handle. So these are great. Put this into your playbooks, understand, put it on the front page. How do you handle an incident? What steps to take? So, spoken about playbooks. I've spoken about some guides and some tools. Let's now talk about TTP versus IOC. That's a lot of acronyms. What is TTP? So as cybersecurity professionals, if you're in operations, you know what TTP is. Tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTP. And also IOCs, indicators of compromise. So these are very important during incident response and investigations. What are they exactly? So an IOC, for example, they are artifacts that's evidence of malicious activity occurring. So for example, you see a random unknown IP address all of a sudden come up and trying to access your network. That's an indicator, right? You can see maybe email addresses, sending from somewhere, a sender coming into your inbox. That's an indicator. And this is good. These are good data points, but focusing on incident response and TTPs is better. What is a TTP? Now let's look at what a TTP is versus IOC. So for example, if a hacker used a registry key to store config data for your malware within your own network, the IOC, indicator of compromise, the IOC itself is that registry key and the value of it. However, TTP is the way that they use the indicators. And in this case, it's the modification of the registry itself to evade detection. So that's a technique used by this hacker to do and modify the registry key. So that's TTP versus IOC. So why focus on TTPs? So I'll give you probably a prime example. Think about this. An attacker is using a certain tool, right? A hacking tool. And they've used this tool, maybe custom built, to scan your network. Once they find a Chongwol, they do something to it. They maybe apply some sort of a script to try to get through that specific port number, or that Chongwol, right? That vulnerability gap that's missing, right? They use this tool. Now, if you use TTPs as an indicator, basically to detect these attackers, the technique is using this tool itself, right? And imagine the tool, how it operates, right? How it scans. If you can blacklist the way this tool is going to attacking to your network, right? To poke your holes, if you know this tool and exactly what it does, blacklist the tool, blacklist the profile, blacklist how it does it. If you do that, how much effort is it taking the attacker to use another tool, right? Maybe it took time to build this custom tool. Maybe he has a second tool, fine. He'll switch to the second tool. But then you'll know shortly after the type of tool that he's using, you block that tool tip as well. So does he have a third tool? Maybe, maybe not. But the point is, having this technique is only fixed. You can only have so many tools in your arsenal, right? Indicators are different. You can have so many IPs that you can come from, spoofing, netted IPs, you name it. There's a lot more indicators, right? But having the technique is finite. There's only a certain number of techniques that the attacker can use. And once you block, once you remediate against this technique, then you make it much more difficult or impossible for the attacker to come back in. So they give up. The whole premise of addressing an incident and remediating is or even protecting in security or cybersecurity, is to make it as hard as possible for the attacker. So that's why we need to focus on TTPs. So where do you find these TTPs? How do you build this? You don't have to build it from scratch. From zero. So there is a attack framework called MITRE. Sukotwa, M-I-T-R-E, but you pronounce it MITRE. So if you don't know this, please do take this down, attack.mitre.com. or .org. And basically, this gives you a list of known techniques to achieve a given tactic by these actors. It's a great way to actually have a common language if something happens. And below is a small snapshot, but you just go to this site and you'll see the complete picture. Let's give you an example of how to use this MITRE ATT&CK matrix. So the scenario is identify the adversary authenticating to remote host using RDP, right? A terminal services event log. So what do? Actually go to the attack matrix and you identify RDP, remote desktop protocol. And from there's a tactic you can kind of go to and identify lateral movement. So if you use this mapping device, you say, look, I know this technique is RDP. I know the tactic now is lateral movement. You can communicate this finding to your stakeholders on what to do next, because each corresponding technique has a tactic, procedure, and what you do against it. So very easy way to map it. So you don't have to start from scratch. So this is something I want to share online as a resource as well. An organization maps different techniques, tactics, processes. So this is kind of like a big flower circular method. You can imagine, look at this, how many techniques within? It's only completely finite. There's only a fixed number of techniques you see. But after that, tactics, different, tens of 20s, different tactics are there. And under each tactic is a process or procedure. So this is an easy way to visualize the number of ways hackers use TTPs to gain access or hack your network. So please please look into this. Okay, I'm going to give you another example of IOC versus TTP. I've given you one before, but this is a real life case study that happened. So an organization, a large financial services company over Nung San Kwan, right? They had a world-class millions of dollars of investment in their security team, incident response team. They found out they had compromised endpoints that revealed domain names, IP addresses used by the CNC servers by the hackers. So the challenges during the investigation was basically they searched the organization for other endpoints using this same IOC. IOC meaning, the IP addresses and all that. But what happened was they only discovered one machine that was infected with this IOC, or these IOCs that were on it. The actual machine that was already don't hack. And what happened after this was, after they discovered this, the IOC disappeared. หายไปเลยครับ from this machine. And the investigation lasted for 6 เดือน. 6 more months after that, because they were, imagine this company with a great IR team that no understanding using IOCs to identify what was going on. So every time these computers got infected, they detected only by IOCs, IP addresses, and all that stuff, but they disappeared. They were switch on, switch off. And every forensic investigation revealed that each endpoint connected to a different IP address. So imagine if you kept on blacklisting different IPs, it's just unending, right? Imagine how many IPs address can be spoofed, can be registered. So what happened at the end? So basically, this financial services company ended up working with their vendor's IR team. The IR team, what they usually do, a lot of the incident response companies, they would mandate that this company deploy an endpoint solution that detects TTPs, right? Techniques, tactics, and processes or procedures. And this engine itself was able to detect the TTP and behaviors used by the hackers. And Solopwa, at the end of Ha1, they discovered 3,000 compromised endpoints. So they discovered using TTPs instead of the IOCs that, there were much more computers that were infected. So just to summarize, adopting detection strategy based on TTPs gives really powerful information to you as the defender. Some of the common IR tools I like to share, case management and incident management. is important. So case management, there's this one tool called CYDARM, CYDARM. And what it does, it's a case management tool where you create new cases, right? A case of an incident. And you start from step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Create the case, collect the hosts, collect the telemetry data, how to collect the logs, where to put it, and stuff like that. So this is a case management system. So CYDARM is a very good one commercially. There's also communication platforms. How do you communicate, right? I'm not sure. Every company is different, right? I have one company in Chai, Microsoft Teams, another one that Chai Slack, another that Chai the Google Hangouts. So you need to have a main agreed communication platform, and even those out of band, right? Are we going to use Signal? Are we going to be using WhatsApp? Are we going to use Line? Right? You have to have an agreed way to do it securely. Also, reporting platforms, status page, documents. How do you report? Are you going to use Google Docs? Are you going to use Microsoft PowerPoint, Microsoft, PPTs or Docs as well? Status page is a pretty good reporting platform as well. Some of my companies are software development shops, so they use Jira for everything, ticketing system, ITSM. So they use Jira, which is great for reporting. For logging, right? CM tools, logging aggregation platforms like Splunk, Elasticsearch, QRadar, all these places that you can correlate, aggregate logs. Really, really important. Native tools as well that reads. Don't have any specific information, but for the next one, forensics and analysis tools, really good. So, like I said before in the case study, there has been incident response teams from suppliers that deploy EDR solutions, endpoint detection and response. So in this case, CrowdStrike, Falcon. CrowdStrike is a great tool, commercial tool, that a lot of these companies use to deploy on their endpoint to collect the telemetry data and bring it in and analyze and build actually the forensics roadmaps and understanding what happened. Okay. And then some useful distributions with pre-installed forensics tools. If you are in red team right now in cybersecurity, right, you actually love your Kali Linux. Kali Linux have pen test tools pre-built and pre-installed. So this is the same thing. So some useful distributions that have forensics analysis tools, SIFT workstation, we have Flare VM and Security Onion. So take a look at these tools, read up about it, and see if it's fit for your organization. Okay, so let's move on. I think we have about 15 minutes left, so we're looking okay. We have remediation. Let me take a pause. Let me take a quick pause and have a little nam. And มีคำถามไหมครับอันนี้
Okay, no questions so far.
Oh, okay.
Right. But the admin has already posted the link to the survey. So yeah, like the participants can start filling in the survey. Okay. There is one question.
Oh, okay.
All right. So from Group Captain Jadet as well. So the question is how to start building up IR team for small organization.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it starts with getting the headcount and budget, right? I have had clients that don't have enough resources, that don't have the budget and all that. So a lot of times in small organizations, people wear many hats, right? I was a SOC lead, but I was also doing threat intel. I was doing IR as well. And it depends on the maturity, right? I think, for example, one, you need an IR team, like we said, incident response, fundamentals, foundations, having a team, number one. Now, is it going to be a dedicated team or a shared resource team? That's a question you need to ask your company and say, look, I go to my CEO, I go to my board of directors, I go to my IT director or CISO and say, ต้องการคนที่จะสร้างเป็น IR team ได้ไหม? And they say like, no budget. So what do you do? Very hard answer to that. You need to build capabilities. Start from your own security team who doing maybe network security that have an understanding of security, foundations at least. and start from there. Have some person commit maybe 25 to 50% of their time to start building these capabilities. And you don't have to like sound from scratch. Like, there's all these resources are readily available. You can build right away and build it quick. Another thing is, if you do have budget or no resource, right? Scenario to song. You say, we'll give you budget, but no headcount. What do you do? Then you can think about hiring a third party, a partner, right? A lot of มีบริษัทเยอะที่ทำแบบนี้ได้ครับ IR plans, IR teams on retainer, right? If something hits, they're the first to contact, and they'll kickstart the whole process right away, right? That's another scenario, right? And third, if you say, okay, I need this team, and the board or the CEO or your boss says, okay, give you a budget, give you a team, then you can start building that. Then you go out there and source for candidates that have that experience to start it up. Okay.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Ka. So that's all the question for this section.
Okay, ขอบคุณมากครับ Okay เหลืออีก10 นาทีเดี๋ยวเริ่มต้นในนี้สุดท้าย remediation. How do you do effective remediation? So I'll share with you, there are 3 types that I've seen in my experience. There's effective remediation. That is done really well. I've seen ineffective remediation. You want to do gakai this incident, but you don't do it effectively because you don't know, or you don't have a systematic approach, or you're not organized, or you don't have a comms plan in place. So that's ineffective. And the third one is no remediation, because you don't know what's happening. Like, you don't know what you don't know, right? So having a security team that doesn't know what's going on in the network, very bad. So no remediation is probably the worst thing, because you just don't know what's going on. Like I said, no remediation, no change, you're still compromised. Ineffective remediation, there are resources spent, you're maybe wasting a lot of time. You know that maybe the attacker knows that you know, but you're still compromised because you don't do effective remediation. And lastly, effective, you're using efficient resources. You don't tell the adversary or the enemy what's going on. They have no idea. Then you know. And you're very highly confident that your remediation plan is done well and everything's solved and you can go to BAU. So remediate, that's a sum up of remediation. So quick case studies in terms of ransomware incidences that we've seen. I'd like to share this statistic that, since 2019, 2 ปี, there's been an increase in 62% in ransomware alone. So facts and figures to share. In Southeast Asia itself, overall cybercrime, right? It has risen, 600%, 600%. That's a lot. If my investments and return of 600% would be great, I'd be rich, I'd be retired. But 600% in rise in cybercrime in Southeast Asia, with ransomware becoming the #1 prominent malware threat. And they say statistically, attacks will globally occur every 11 seconds. And that actually can total in damages, or has been totaling damages in cost of 20,000 ล้านเหรียญ in this year alone. Now, I wanted to share what are the top 5 industries, because this is really important, by ransomware attacks. And you can see the top 1 is manufacturing, followed by financial services, transportation, and there's healthcare, retail underneath, government and defense, energy. Why is that? เหตุผลเป็นไร? How come? How come there's such a problem? And it's because, there's a increasing number of available targets. Things in technology are evolving. Things are coming online. IoT, Internet of Things now, Internet of Everything, IoE, everything's coming online. IP address, everything has an IP address, MAC address. Your car, ขับรถ ทุกวันนี้ขับรถอะไร It's a computer. You're not really driving a car anymore. You're driving a computer. Everything's electronic, and everything is connecting, right? And with that, it's a hacker's heaven. They can have more and more to attack, more and more to exploit. And the reason ransomware is so easy and the most used technique by hackers is because people are willing to pay. เขายอมจ่าย hackers. Say, for example, in the US, even the US, a hospital got hit. All their data for patient data, all their systems got encrypted. And the hacker demanded about, I think it was like a couple $1 million, Lailan. And you know what they did? They paid because they had no backup. They had sensitive patient data. The systems couldn't be used. So critical, respiratory systems, heart systems, everything was down. So imagine the life, the litigations, the brand reputation, everything was a mess. So they paid. And they eventually got the key, the private key, to decrypt and return it. But look at that. That's why. That's why the criminals are finding lucrative and profitable to do this. So ransomware has been really bad. And two examples, in September of this year, a Malaysian web hosting service was a target of a ransomware attack, and they were asking for 9,000 lian in crypto. Even in May of this year, an insurance company across Muang Thai, Malaysia, Hong Kong, Philippines, they were hit by a ransomware attack, and they were asking for 20 lian. So imagine, look at these numbers. They're just going up and up and that, versus the fact that, it'll take a little percentage of that to build a proper IR process and team to mitigate and close that gap. Here's an anatomy of a ransomware attack to share really quickly to you. This is from the UN website. What happens during a ransomware attack exactly, if we want to understand what it is? So simply put, attacker sends a phishing email, user clicks on this link, malware unpacks, this malware infects the system, able to encrypt the data, and then phone home, telling the hacker, say, hey, look, I encrypted the data, contact the victim. So the attacker contacts the victim, say, I have your data. Give me so-and-so money, and then I'll give you the key to uncrypt it. So that's how ransomware basically happens, or typically happens. So coming to the end, I want to have you ask yourself or ask the organization, how would your company respond in a situation like this, like ransomware? Do you have an incident response plan initiated? Do you have that ready? Do you have playbooks? Do you know who is involved? Do you know what external entities you need to talk to? Do you have a proper communication protocol? Do you have what it takes to acquire the data? Do you know the TTPs and IOCs being used? Are you able to deploy additional tools if the current tools are not good enough? What are the timeframes for remediation? Do you have an SLA? Do you have a time to response, time to detect, response, and recover? What type of remediation plans do you have? Are they effective? And what other actions are there? So just have a good thought about that. Just say, สมมติว่าโดนแฮกวันนี้ ransomware. Everything's encrypted, your entire network. Do you have what it takes to respond today? Okay. So wrapping it up, I just wanted to share with you some more resources, some useful resources. The UK National Cybersecurity Consortium has this kind of a flowchart. Understand this first link is the bottom right. Incident management, incident response. What happens in each step? You can go to this one. Sysnet IR plan template. You can go to this website and sign up with your email, and they'll have templates to help you start building an IR plan. And the third link is an incident response consortium playbook. This is a great site, incidentresponse.com/playbook, and it's this snapshot picture on top. It has ready out of the box playbooks. You click on the phishing, they'll give you different techniques, tactics, like kind of like the attack MITRE framework. So it shows you exactly what you need to do, how to do it. So this is a great start. You don't have to start from zero again. Everything's been put into play. So wrapping it up, we talked about, what is incident response, the foundations. What is the outcome? Why are we doing this? What are the common mistakes to avoid? Some of the methodologies and approaches, the TTPs and IOCs with a case study, some supporting frameworks, maybe from NIST, some common toolings, ineffective, effective, and no remediation, and a few ransomware case studies. So with that, I'd like to wrap it up and ขอบคุณทุกคนที่ฟังผมวันนี้นะครับ One last thing to share again, another bonus. I'd like to share more data and information to share here is a sample incident response workflow. And I love this one because it's kind of like a swim lane. So you can understand functional teams, end user, IT help desk, IT security, service owner management. What do you do in terms of each stage of incident response? Who to contact, how to contact, at what decision tree or decision point you need to do. So this is a fantastic one. I'm happy to share this one. Okay, so thank you very much. This is my full name, my email address if you need to contact me for any questions. My Signal WhatsApp เบอร์โทรศัพท์ของ Singapore, my US number as well, and my Thai number. So I'm all over the place. My LinkedIn profile as well if you need to connect with me or want to chat further. But other than that, I'd like to thank you very much. ขอบคุณมากครับทุกคน
Sorry ค่ะ thank you so much ค่ะคุณกวิน Okay ค่ะ so น้องแซงคะเดี๋ยวเราจะมีช่วง Q&A ก่อนถูกไหมคะ
ใช่ค่ะ
Okay ค่ะ so now I think like we have a couple of minutes to let the participants to ask questions. Are there any further questions?
Anything about IR basics? Anything about my experience to share? I've been, in cyber for over 20 years in US and APAC, so I do have experience across the region and the world. I have clients from UK, US, and Asia. So anything to if you want to think about, any things to talk about.
There is one question right now. It just ended, and I think it's really like it fits really well with your experience and expertise that you just described. Okay, it's from Group Captain Judet as well. So based on your experiences, do you have any recommendations of how to test the National Cyber Incident Response Plan?
Wow, that's a great question. At a national level, very complex. When it's not just Nung Bodhisan, right? It's affecting and impacting the entire country and how we respond to incidences. So I guess Nung Tamwa, like you have a plan in place, right? You have everything documented. Have you ever tested ever? Have you ever tested with maybe a test group or a particular sector or industry? Start small, right? Start with a specific, maybe even tabletop exercise, something that you don't have to go through like in the real life scenario, right? Have a real life scenario, but run that in a closed door session, right? In a tabletop with the relevant stakeholders. And you can role play, right? ไม่จำเป็นที่จะเป็นthe board of directors, the CEO, you can role play. You can pretend that you're the CEO or have a group that's pretending they're IT security or pretend people that are IT infra. What do you do in a case, in a situation, in a scenario? Then run it out like that.
Okay. I hope that answers the question. All right. Any other questions before? Okay ค่ะ All right. No more question ค่ะคุณกวินค่ะคุณจะเด็ด thank you so says thank you
Okay ขอบคุณมากครับ
ค่ะโอเคค่ะถ้าอย่างนั้นแล้วนะคะ so if there are no any further questions I would like to pass the stage on to น้องแซงนะคะ the other MC ค่ะ
ขอบคุณนะคะขอบคุณสำหรับท่านวิทยากรคุณกวินด้วยนะคะน้องแซงขออนุญาตขอความร่วมมือความอนุเคราะห์ทุกท่านนะคะในการช่วยทำแบบสอบถามนะคะเพื่อประโยชน์ต่อการปรับปรุงและพัฒนาให้ดีขึ้นของการอบรมครั้งนี้ต่อไปค่ะขอบคุณค่ะลำดับถัดไปนะคะน้องแซงขออนุญาตเชิญท่านจเด็ดนะคะกล่าวปิดการประชุมค่ะขอบคุณค่ะ
ขอบคุณมากนะครับน้องแซงครับก็กล่าวสวัสดีทางท่านวิทยากรนะครับคุณกวินนะครับก็จริงๆแล้ว ในช่วง3วันมานี้นะครับผมอยากเข้ามาฟังท่านวิทยากรได้นำเสนอพยายามอย่างมากเลยครับที่จะหาเวลาก็มีวันนี้ครับที่ได้เข้ามาฟังนะครับแล้วก็ก่อนอื่นก็ขอขอบคุณนะครับถือว่าเป็นเนื้อหาที่ดีมากๆนะครับหาฟังได้ยากนะครับก็สำหรับท่านอื่นๆนะครับที่ยังอาจจะท่านเข้ามาฟังแล้วก็ผมเชื่อว่าส่วนใหญ่ท่านอาจจะมีตัว Incident Response Plan ของท่านอยู่แล้วนะครับแต่ว่าผมว่าการที่เราได้ฟังจากท่านวิทยากรที่ท่านมีประสบการณ์ตรงเนี่ยมันทำให้เราได้เห็นนะครับว่าไอ้ตัวแผนที่เรามีปัจจุบันเนี่ยมันมีอะไรที่เราจะสามารถปรับปรุงขึ้นได้อีกนะครับผมมั่นใจว่าหลังจากอย่างเช่นตัวผมเองเนี่ยครับได้ฟังทางคุณกวินเล่าให้ฟังแล้วเนี่ยผมก็เข้าใจมากขึ้นนะครับเพราะงั้นก็ตัวผมเองก็ได้ประโยชน์มากครับแล้วก็จะเอาสิ่งที่ทางคุณกวินที่เป็นท่านวิทยากรนะครับได้นำเสนอเนี่ยผมก็จะเอาไปปรับใช้นะครับโดยเฉพาะการจัดการฝึกที่กำลังจะเกิดขึ้นในช่วง22ถึง24ธันวาคมนี้นะครับสำหรับท่านอื่นๆนะครับผมมั่นใจว่าถ้าท่านได้ฟังทางคุณกวินได้นำเสนอแล้วนะครับผมมั่นใจว่าท่านน่าจะได้มุมมองดีๆท่านน่าจะเข้าใจมากขึ้นว่าการทำ Incident Response เนี่ยมันมีประเด็นหลากหลายที่จะต้องคำนึงถึงนะครับท่านน่าจะเข้าใจถึงบทบาทความรับผิดชอบมากขึ้นว่าในมุมของการทำ Incident Response เนี่ยท่านมีหน้าที่อะไรนะครับได้เข้าใจ process มากขึ้นได้เข้าใจองค์ประกอบของตัวแพลนนะครับว่าIncident Response Plan มันควรจะมีองค์ประกอบอะไรบ้างนะครับก็หวังว่าความรู้ที่ท่านได้รับทั้งหมดในวันนี้รวมถึงเมื่อ2วันที่ผ่านมานะครับสำหรับหลายๆท่านที่ไม่ได้อยู่ในวันนี้นะครับท่านน่าจะเอาไปเตรียมความพร้อมก่อนที่จะเข้าร่วมการฝึกในระยะเวลาอันใกล้นี้ต่อไปครับก็หลังจากนี้ก็ฝากทางน้องหวาครับไล่เรียนถามท่านวิทยากรนิดนึงครับว่าท่านมีอะไรจะกล่าวเป็น key takeaway หรือว่าเป็นwrap up สุดท้ายก็ขออนุญาตทางน้องหวาเลยครับ
คุณกวิน are you still with us
อยู่ครับ
Okay ค่ะwould you like to say any like key takeaways before we finish the sessions for today?
So I'd like to thank you everyone for these past few days and just this session. I think it's for me in my heart ในใจผมนะครับคนไทยรักเมืองไทยทั้งที่จะเกิดและโตที่อเมริกาผมอยากจะเห็นเมืองไทยเจริญในการไซเบอร์นะครับ I want to see Thailand as one of the best places to have security and be center stage in Asia to be the country that a lot of people want to follow. In Singapore, right, and Hong Kong, you have like forward-thinking countries that are prepared for attacks. So in my heart, I'm very happy, like DJ Mark, DJ มีโอกาสที่จะคุยกันพูดเรื่องนี้กับทุกคนทุกท่านวันนี้ and just if you have any questions ถ้ามีคำถามเลยนะครับ I'm very happy to participate free of charge, just discuss and improve the situation, where to start, what to do, and all that. So that's my summary, and thank you again. ขอบคุณมากครับ
ก็ขอบคุณคุณกวินเป็นอย่างสูงนะครับก็ดีใจมากๆครับที่ได้รู้จักกันนะครับแล้วก็ผมอยากให้ทุกๆคนนะครับที่พวกเราได้เข้าฟังคุณกวินนะครับได้แสดงความขอบคุณท่านวิทยากรนะครับก็ท่านสามารถที่จะพิมพ์ข้อความเข้ามาได้นะครับเพื่อแสดงความขอบคุณท่านวิทยากรนะครับแล้วก็หวังเป็นอย่างยิ่งครับว่าหลังจากนี้ครับคงไม่ใช่ครั้งสุดท้ายที่ได้เจอคุณกวินครับก็ในโอกาสต่อไปถ้ามีโอกาสได้ขอความช่วยเหลือหรือว่าขอท่านวิทยากรได้มานำเสนอหรือมาพูดคุยหรือว่ามาอธิบายให้พวกเราอีกก็ขออนุญาตขอความกรุณาท่านไว้ล่วงหน้าครับสำหรับในอนาคตต่อไปครับก็ผมมีเท่านี้ครับก็ถ้าอย่างนั้นก็วันนี้ก็ถ้าไม่มีใครมีอะไรแล้วก็ขอบคุณทุกท่านมากครับแล้วก็ขอปิดการอบรมสำหรับวันนี้เพียงเท่านี้ครับขอบคุณครับสวัสดีครับ
สวัสดีค่ะ
วัสดีค่ะ